Welcome to the last session of the Coworking conference, the best Coworking conference ever. So we have a great panel today with Laura and Iris. Before starting with them, I'm going to give thanks to our sponsors that, as you know, is the Valley. The Valley, I'm going to change to Spanish, okay, just a bit. The Valley es un ecosistema de conocimiento digital colaborativo y abierto, que ofrece soluciones basadas en tecnología para la formación, la selección de talento y la digitalización. Y lo componen la Escuela de Negocios, el Headhunter para perfiles digitales, un espacio colaborativo para startups y la gestora de The Valley Venture Capital, cuyo objetivo es impulsar el crecimiento, el desarrollo de compañías en fase semilla que ofrecen servicios de software B2B. También quiero agradecer, como siempre, a Nexudus, que es un software de gestión de espacios. I'm going to change to English. Nexudus is a software for co-working spaces. And we also give thank you to Cobot, that's also a software for manage co-working spaces. Iseo, it's lockers, intelligent lockers, and Correct that are spaces in Barcelona. After this, we are going to introduce a small video, and then we are going to start with the session.
El mundo se está transformando a gran velocidad. Tenemos ante nosotros un gran reto, ser competitivos en un entorno nuevo y disruptivo que debemos conocer para estar preparados. Y prepararse significa un aprendizaje continuo, pero también colaborar y co-crear con nuevo talento y liderar desde la innovación. En The Valley conectamos conocimiento, personas y tecnología. Nuestra misión es lograr que ese conocimiento se convierta en el driver que transforme la sociedad. Con nuestros programas y másters para directivos, profesionales y recién titulados y nuestra formación personalizada para empresas, capacitamos en disciplinas y competencias necesarias en el entorno digital. Más de 8.000 alumnos ya forman parte de la comunidad Valiant, una comunidad de la que también forman parte los 600 profesores y coaches especializados en cada una de las temáticas. Acompañamos a las empresas con una metodología propia a adaptar una cultura que les dote de la eficiencia y la agilidad necesaria para abordar sus procesos de innovación de productos, de servicios y encontrar su propuesta de valor. Las ayudamos a detectar el talento externo mejor preparado para afrontar los nuevos retos. Más de 60 empresas líderes, todas ellas en cada uno de sus sectores, han confiado ya en nosotros. Todo esto es posible porque apostamos por tener ese talento cerca, en nuestro ecosistema de expertos emprendedores, donde contamos con 23 empresas y startups vinculadas al entorno digital. Un entorno en el que las tecnologías disruptivas juegan un papel determinante. Por eso, The Place, nuestro espacio de innovación experimental, se ha convertido en el lugar de referencia donde inspirarnos, debatir y entender y explorar cómo estas tecnologías están acelerando los cambios en la sociedad, impactando en todos los ámbitos, tal y como mostramos en los informes de tendencias sectoriales que presentamos cuatrimestralmente. Bienvenidos a la economía digital. Bienvenidos a The Valley.
Hi, welcome back. Thanks, Iris. Thanks, Laura, to be here. Mark is going to introduce this panel. So please, Mark, go ahead.
Hi. Welcome to this session. This is a very special session for us. We have here with us Iris Kavanagh and Laura Guzmán. They are the co-founders of Women Who Cowork. And this journey started many years ago when we started the Coworking Spain conference. From the very beginning, Manuel was really committed to have the woman enough represented in the conferences. It's really difficult because when you start going up in the hierarchy of companies, women are scarce, and we have to acknowledge that woman is at least, it's more than 50% of our population, but then in power positions, sometimes you lack that presence. So in all the years which the conference have been running, this is our 10th edition, we try every time to improve the woman presence in the conference. And this year, it's our second year in which we have more women than men speaking in the conference. which is it's a great hit for us because we think that we all must commit to this kind of objectives, because doing the opposite is misrepresenting or underrepresenting women in society, and we want to make a step further. And we decided to invite Iris and Laura to share how to create an anti-harassment policy in co-working spaces, because we do think that it's very important not only to keep conference safe. We introduced a gender policy back in 2018, but it's also important to help co-working managers to keep their communities safe. So welcome, Iris, welcome, Laura, and now you have the power.
Thank you, Mark. We are so grateful to be here with all of you today. I'm Laura Guzmán. As Mark mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Women Who Co-Work. I have a love for co-working. I've been in the movement for 13 years. I'm also a practicing mental health professional in the United States with a focus on trauma recovery, and I've worked with sexual assault survivors for over 20 years. So this is a very important topic, and we're really happy to be here. Thank you.
Laura, just give me two advice to the audience. You're going to make a presentation. So the presentation is just available to download just in the app. So you can download right now. And if you have any questions, just make the questions, and then Laura and Iris can answer it. Okay, sorry for that. Go ahead.
Wonderful. And hello, I am Iris Kavanagh, and I am also a co-founder of Women Who Co-Work, along with Laura. And I have been building, operating, and consulting for co-working communities for the past 13 years. I'm also a survivor of sexual assault, and I am passionate about creating safe and inclusive community spaces of belonging. I am deeply appreciative to Co-working Spain Conference and Mark and Manuel for the leadership role in asking us to keynote around the top of creating an anti-harassment policy for co-working communities. It is an honor to be here to speak with you today.
Thank you very much.
And as Laura brings up the first slide, we wanted to share a little bit about Women Who Co-Work. Our mission is to close the gender ownership gap in the co-working movement and to amplify women and non-binary people by providing founders and operators business education, mental health support, resources, and mentorship. We provide services such as business and mental health coaching, gender equity consulting, online events, and retreats. We are a community for the community builders. The focus of today's presentation is to provide an overview of sexual harassment in the shared workspace and the role that co-working can play in prevention. We hope to help you understand what sexual harassment is, the power dynamics that allow it to take place, why this understanding is important for co-working spaces, and how to craft a prevention and response policy.
1 in 2 women globally experience sexual harassment. This is a very alarming number, which is why we want to talk about this today. We want to illuminate how big of an issue this is on the societal level, and we want to come to understand how this affects our individual co-working communities. So simply stated, sexual harassment is any unwelcome sexual conduct which causes another person to feel offended, frightened, humiliated, or intimidated. For an individual, there can be a very impactful psychological effect. For some of the individuals, it varies per person, but the common responses can be feelings of fear, feelings of guilt or shame, shock that it's even happening, embarrassment, even a re-experiencing of past trauma, feelings of anger, substance abuse or substance use to help cope with those feelings, and even work and our career implications. So we wanted to provide types of sexual harassment so that you understand what we're talking about today, what types of behaviors. And we also wanted to show, as this graphic displays, that there is a very strong correlation between the sexual harassment and your work environment. So a healthy environment at work obviously is going to be free of sexual harassment. You're going to experience where there's dignity and respect, that there's feelings of safety and high ethical standards. When you start to see behaviors such as sexual innuendos, sexually charged jokes, online sexual misconduct, inappropriate use of social media, displaying of images, inappropriate sexual images, we start to get into toxic environment. Your work environment begins to feel unsafe. So just take a moment and notice this spectrum of sexual misconduct and notice any of the things that may surprise you, and then also the things that you recognize. So sexual harassment is about power. In most cases, it's an abuse of power. It's an abuse of a power imbalance. So the more power that you have, the more responsibility that you have to do no harm. So take a moment to notice these photographs. What we've done here is shown a couple of different dynamics. And you have where someone is kind of using their body posture to stand over someone else and noticing like the look of discomfort or the withdrawal in these other people's bodies. Also on the street, a woman is walking away in tears, right? So these are showing different ways in which this dynamic can occur between men and women.
So what is a power imbalance? Power imbalance refers to one person in a relationship possessing more power than the other, and a power imbalance between the victim and the harasser is a common feature in sexual harassment cases. The power imbalance negatively impacts the ability of the victim to resist or express non-consent and may perpetuate the harassment and or exacerbate its impact on the harassed person. So these power imbalances exist in society. Power imbalances can show up with identity and status. Examples are race, sexuality, ability, age, gender, culture, language, and class.
So Iris, what does all of this have to do with co-working? Why does co-working need to address sexual harassment?
Yeah, Laura, because stopping sexual harassment is also about power. And we have the power to stop sexual harassment in our co-working spaces. We have the power to model the shared responsibility of being in a community. We, as managers and owners and operators of community, we have an ethical responsibility to keep our members safe. And first and foremost is our responsibility to be inclusive and to do the right thing. We also have a legal responsibility. And while this varies from region to region, we can expect and assume that more and more co-working spaces will be at risk of legal action. Here in the United States, we've noticed that since 2017, co-working spaces have been facing legal action by either members or former employees. In the US, we have a case in Texas in 2017 in a space called Geekdom. And then in 2018, in New York, in a WeWork community, there was a sexual harassment case. And according to a US employment law firm, if harassment in a co-working space is taking place inside the company's workplace, it could weigh in favor of holding the co-working company legally responsible for that harassment.
Thank you, Iris. So what you just addressed is that we do have an ethical responsibility to our community, as we all know, and we most likely have a legal responsibility. And of course, that legal responsibility is going to vary per jurisdiction, but almost in every place, if you check with like a legal employment lawyer, you'll find out more about that. Now, the other thing is that we acknowledge in co-working that many of us create intentionally a flat line, meaning that we don't have a hierarchy. So the common belief is that we're creating an environment where everyone has shared and equal power. But is that fact or fiction? So let's dive into 5 co-working myths, right, to see if this applies. So these are some of the common myths that Iris and I have heard, probably at some point. We may have even thought early on in our own co-working journey, and they include things like, well, I don't have any employees, so this doesn't apply to me. My co-working space has a don't be a jerk policy. Isn't that enough? Most of my members are women, so this doesn't apply. This is a personal dispute between 2 members and doesn't involve us, the co-working space. Or our community is currently online, so sexual harassment can't happen. So what's very interesting with the co-working dynamics is that we're talking about relational dynamics that have to do with specific organizational roles that are unique to co-working, such as owner, staff, member, and guest. And those relationships actually have intersections that create 8 different types. So the traditional type is employer to employee. So we might think owner to staff, staff to owner, that's your community manager to owner, founder. But actually we have staff to staff, staff to member, member to staff, members to members, member to guest, and guest to member. So as you can see, there are a variety of different dynamics that might not have been thought about in those people's co-working myths. Okay, so we're going to continue to also add an additional area of thought. So we have these intersecting relational dynamics, and now we have intersecting power dynamics that include a financial or membership status. So we could have the owner and the staff, the members, guests, having relationships, owner to staff, staff to members, staff to guests. But then what happens when we bring in this third dynamic, which is their financial contributions to the space, the membership status? So that's going to be your flex and your full-time, your month-to-month contract or long-term contract, an open plan, or a private office. Okay, so these are really interesting to notice all of the different intersections that are unique to the ways that power dynamics can show up specifically within the co-working environment. So let's dive in even more to power dynamic scenarios that are happening specifically in co-working. Iris is going to illustrate those and give you some examples that might be able to be applicable to your experience today.
Thanks, Laura. So our first example is the member-to-member power dynamic. This is Anna and Victor. Anna is an office member and Victor is an open plan member. Anna and Victor have been collaborating on a project for a couple of months, and he has become increasingly uncomfortable because Anna is flirting with him during their interactions. Victor has repeatedly let her know that he is not interested, but she has continued to pursue him, and now the flirting has escalated into following him around the space. And just today, she used her body to block him from leaving a work session. He's at a point where he feels so uncomfortable, he's really not sure he wants to work in the co-working space anymore, but he's too embarrassed to tell anyone. And there's not a way to make an anonymous report to the staff. So he gives notice and finds another co-working community to work from. So looking at the power dynamics in this situation, we can consider gender identity, racial identity, financial contribution, and length of contract. In this circumstance, we have Vanessa and William. Vanessa is the community manager, and William is a guest of a member company who has multiple offices in the space. William is a regular at happy hours. Today, he's been drinking, and he may have been drinking a little bit before he got to the happy hour. He's becoming increasingly flirtatious with Vanessa, and he wants another drink. When Vanessa says that there's a 2-drink minimum or 2-drink limit per person, he asks her out for a drink, grabbing her shoulder and pulling her towards them. Just you and me, baby. Come on, let's go get a drink together right now. Vanessa is feeling very uncomfortable, and she reports to the owner what happened. So in this scenario, the power dynamics that we consider are gender identity, the organizational roles, the relationship to the member, and the financial contribution of that member, and the length of contract of that member. And this last scenario, we have Ryan, and we are looking at member to staff dynamics. So another example of a relationship that dynamic can be between a member and staff. In this scenario, Ryan is the community manager at a space with majority female membership. Ryan is relatively new to the community and really enjoys being attentive to everyone's needs. He's a stickler for details, and the members really appreciate that. He is beginning to experience a lot of microaggressions, little things like a comment here about what he's wearing that day, a quick smile, a wink. Today, when he handed a member a cup of coffee, she took it and then playfully squeezed his bicep, making a comment about his physique. Ryan is really uncomfortable. He brings his concern to the owner, who is also female. She laughs it off, declaring how flattered he must be that all the ladies of the space love him. He's actually feeling really angry and disappointed, but he tries to let it go because he really, really needs this job. So the power dynamics in this scenario are gender identity, the organizational role, the financial contribution of the harassing members, and the length of the contract of the harassing members.
Thank you, Iris, for all those scenarios. So we might actually come back to our original question of fact or fiction. We believe that this is fiction, that power dynamics exist in co-working communities as well. And we hope that these scenarios have illuminated. And one of the common myths is that men are not sexually harassed. And so we gave some examples here of both male to female and female to male. Now, you might be wondering, of course, like, what do we do next? So we shared these scenarios because we really want to help you to start identifying these power dynamics within your community, because if you can see them, then you can act to prevent them. And hopefully you can effectively start responding to them. So you, the founders and the operators, have the power to stop sexual harassment. And I want to say that again. You, the founders and the operators, have the power to stop sexual harassment. But where do you start? Having a sexual harassment policy in place is a #1 effective prevention strategy to start, and it creates clear expectations for you and for your community. All right, so let's get started and dig into what is a sexual harassment policy and how would you start creating one. Most importantly, a sexual harassment policy needs to include guidance, tools, and resources. We're going to start with the guidance. So guidance is really about laying out the different procedures and the steps. So we think it's always important to start with education. So prevention starts with education for staff and for members. And so we want to create a clear member agreement that outlines the expectations. Members will sign these often when they begin working in a space. So this will clearly identify where you stand and what to do for them to speak out, report, and what to expect. So that brings us to the report. So outline your procedures on how they're going to be able to report to a community manager or to the founder. It's really important that you have an anonymous way to report as well. This is really challenging for many people to be able to speak up about. Notice that in the scenario that Iris shared with Victor and Anna, that Victor actually left that co-working space. That actually did happen in Geekdom in San Antonio, Texas, where they lost an entire company client to that situation. Also, you need to then set up the investigation. So once it's been reported and documented, then we begin to investigate. You pull aside in private confidential relationships, the conversation with the person who has made the complaint. You have the conversation interview with the person who has been accused of harassment, and then any witnesses that might have been present at the time. So those conversations are really important for that part of the investigation. Now, once you have your report documented, you've continued on with this investigation, you're going to want to come to a resolution. A resolution is going to actually document what steps did you take and what was the final outcome. You're going to want to have everyone who was involved to sign that paperwork so that you have a full, complete file in place. At some point along these steps, you may even want to consult with an employment lawyer or a sexual harassment expert in order to make sure that you're doing every step along the way. But more than anything, document, document, document. So every step needs to be in writing so that you can show anyone who comes and asks later what the process was and how it was resolved. So that's the guidance piece. That's the actual policy that you're going to have written into your terms of agreement, your code of conduct. But that's not all that you can do. It's really important that you're also providing tools and resources to your community. So you're educating them, not just in that member agreement, but you're educating them throughout their lifetime as a member in the space by providing educational materials that involve such things as sexual harassment. We have a member in Colorado who shared that she actually put a comic book in her space that was especially designed by a company, Define the Line, that brings awareness to how these dynamics can occur at work. The comic book is something she puts out in the lounge. It's something that has become a bit of a conversation piece where people are curious about. It starts conversations that people are able to have without feeling too uncomfortable. You also can bring in experts, have them come do a training or a presentation. Sexual harassment at work applies to all of the different companies and individuals in your workspace. That might be helping them learn how to do better business, and you're creating that culture in your co-working space. And participation in prevention and awareness campaigns can also model and show your community that it's important for you, and you're educating and showing your support. For example, Iris and I participated just this last month of April in the United States in solidarity of national prevention and awareness for sexual assault. So this was our way of showing our community that we are passionate about this topic, and we participated alongside with that larger social media campaign. And then also, if you're not yet aware of it, we have an amazing organization in the co-working movement that is called the Co-working Idea Project. The whole initiative there is a global conversation around inclusivity, diversity, equity, and accessibility, specifically for co-working spaces. And they give you these step-by-step challenges that helps you bring something into your space that didn't exist before that can address these inclusivity issues. Their April challenge was actually to update your code of conduct. So Iris and I started working on our harassment policy. What can we specifically add to the code of conduct to make it really clear for co-working spaces to follow the guidance that I just outlined before. So the good news is that we know we didn't have time to do a deep dive and workshop specifically your code of conduct. So Women Who Cowork has created a sexual harassment policy toolkit. And this is going to be available for all of you that are present today. You can download your free toolkit at that link, which we will make sure is also shared easily to all of you. And this toolkit is going to really help you be able to take some policy and plug that into your existing agreements and tweak it to meet your community needs.
And so finally, we really wanted to end this conversation today with a reminder and an inspiration around the shared power that community has and the shared responsibility that everyone in a community holds for that community. So this quote by Priya Parker, "In the art of gathering, how we meet and why it matters," really fits for the co-working movement as a whole and for the conversation around keeping everyone safe in a co-working space. In a group, if everybody thinks about the other person's needs, everyone's needs are actually fulfilled in the end. But if you only think about yourself, you are breaking that contract.
Thank you, Iris. That's such a powerful quote.
So if you'd like more information about Women Who Cowork, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We do love to collaborate and expand on our own learning, and we can take this further as a group or work with you and your team individually. You can email us or contact us across all social media channels. We are Women Who Cowork. And thank you so much for your time and your attention. And we really look forward to continuing this conversation and making this movement even better with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I would like to talk about two things. Maybe Laura, you can stop sharing the screen. Okay, now I'm seeing you. I want to talk about two things because we have a really long conversation before this presentation take place. And I was, I'm worried for this kind of situations because they shouldn't exist, right? And I think we all agree on that. But I want you to talk a bit more about awareness, and then we will go to cultural differences. But I would like to talk about awareness, like how important is that co-working managers and all the community is aware of what may be going on, because sometimes it's not very easy to detect these situations, right?
Exactly. Yes, thank you, Mark. And that is one of the reasons why we wanted to give the specific scenarios that we mentioned in the presentation, because people don't think about how this is happening because they don't always witness it. Every one of these, especially the first scenario that we talked about with Victor and Anna, this is happening between members in your space you might not see, so you don't have this awareness. Being able to talk about it openly, be transparent, talk about that 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted. 1 in 2 are sexually harassed. Like being able to actually bring this into conversation, like I said, with a presentation specifically. You know how we have events in our co-working spaces often. We bring in social media, we bring in marketing, we're bringing in all of these things that help our members do better business. Well, keeping your customers safe, keeping yourself educated about the risks that both men and women can face, that's good business in our opinion. So that awareness is having the conversations, right, Iris? And I'm sure you have some things to add to that as well.
Yes, Mark, thank you for that question. Really important. And I think also understanding that a community manager is often somebody who is relatively new to the workforce and or has a lot of responsibility just managing the community and doesn't really have the skill set or the experience to know how to handle a situation like this when it comes up. So having awareness around the processes, the procedures, how to handle this situation before it arises is going to be really important for protecting also the longevity of the staff and the integrity of the staff. And I also want to point out that having your members be aware that this is a policy that you have in place is also really just makes good business sense, because all companies, now, of course, this is my experience in the US, and I don't know that this is the case across the globe, but in the US, all companies are responsible for keeping a harassment-free workplace for their employees. And so if your co-working space can offer a harassment-free workplace along with coffee, Wi-Fi, conference rooms, you're really setting them up for doing good business and having a really productive and happy experience in your co-working space.
Thank you so much. The other topic I was interested talking about, it was it is cultural differences, right? Because we have this conversation, right? For example, people from the US usually say that Spaniards are touchy, that we touch each other all the time. I always reply, yes, but you're living here, so you should like it. Or, I mean, you know, we are different, and any country is different. But I think that, and this is for sure a personal opinion, that there's a red line, and that red line is common everywhere, which is if someone feels bad about something that's going on. So at the end, when this video ends up in YouTube, and it can be seen all over the world, I would like to hear your point of view about this issue, right? How to adapt these kind of situations, and if that red line that I set in some way, it's correct or not. How do you feel about this?
And this is a great question, Mark, because a lot of times people don't know what that line is until they ask, until we have these conversations, or they even have to know within themselves what that red line is if they need to set a boundary. So what that is consent. So a lot of times we're talking about consent, but people don't really understand that it's as simple as saying, I'd really love to give you a hug. Is that okay? Right? And once you've established that person's like, oh yeah, I love hugs, then that is consent. And then you're able to give a hug. Or maybe you have touched someone because it's your style, you're affectionate, you like to put your hand on someone when you're connecting with them. But as soon as you notice if that person kind of flinches or has a look on their face, be watching for those moments and then check and say, oh, I'm so sorry. I was just wanting to connect with you. Is it okay if I, put my hand on your arm? These types of things may feel a little awkward at first, but it's really important that we start naming what it is that we are experiencing. Like, I really want to connect. Are you okay if I give you a hug? If I can place my hand on your shoulder? And then if for some reason you forget, there's always that correction when that person is uncomfortable, that you respect and respond. We're not perfect human beings, and we're going to mess up. And sometimes we're going to do something that we thought was helpful or kind or, welcomed. And then that person says, no, that makes me uncomfortable, right? So being able to practice that and model that in the space, the community managers actually and the founders are in a really great position to do that. So if you actually make that move towards someone and they say, oh, that I'm a little uncomfortable, then you get to graciously model for them, for the rest of the community. Oh, of course, like I really want to respect you and respect your boundaries. So no worries at all, right? So this kind of engagement that we do in front of each other is showing that we're learning together, but underlying it, we have respect for each other, and everyone has a different comfort zone. So that's kind of what we really want to encourage co-working spaces and founders and managers to realize, again, like we said in the presentation, we have power to influence in a positive way and to teach and to show what that's like to have this mutual respect and to ask for consent. What do you think, Iris?
Yeah, I think, Mark, I really appreciate, excuse me, I really appreciate this question. I am like that. I am a person who likes to touch. It's part of my nature. I'm an expressive person, and I'm a physical contact person. And so I have learned that when I'm establishing a relationship with somebody, especially in the workplace, I let them, I say that up front. I say, hey, you know, I'm really enjoying getting to know you. I can't wait to work together. How are you? Like, I'm a really expressive person, and I tend to like touch somebody's arm or, you know, just like high five, those kinds of things. How are you with physical contact? And that gives the person sort of the ability to say, I'm not a physical contact person, or, hey, I'm a total hugger. I'm an auto hugger. That sounds great. And then that sort of like, I think sometimes it can feel awkward to do so in the moment, to say, I want to touch your shoulder, because that's really more of a, you know, a sort of automatic gesture that you do. But if you set the stage before at the beginning of the relationship, before you're really spending a lot of time together, then you can know that this person is comfortable with physical contact, or this person is not comfortable with physical contact. And then finally, I want to really just amplify what Laura was saying around when we do make a mistake, because we will, the most important thing is to make sure that the person knows that we regret the mistake that we made, and that we acknowledge the harm that we've done when we made that mistake. That's a very, very important piece.
Thank you so much.
I have a very small question. We are on time. We're still on time. But thanks for the kit. I will download right away. And I want you to know, it's those policies are adopting a lot it's those policies are being adopted by a lot of co-working spaces in the US. Are you seeing this movement rising? This demand rising?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Iris, do you want to take this one first?
Mm-hmm. Manuel, I'm so sorry. I want to make sure that I understood the question. Are you asking if people in the US are starting to adopt anti-harassment policies in their co-working spaces?
Yes, I mean, for us, we have a few cases in Spain that that's why we have this panel, because we have those cases in Spain. But there's not too many people, or not too many companies like Women Who Cowork providing this service, right? So
Right.
you're in the US,
yes.
You are providing this service, and how is the demand of this service by co-working spaces? Is rising a lot? Is you still not too much? You are starting, or this completely full of these policies adopted by co-working spaces?
Yeah, I would say we're at the beginning here in the US. I think that there is awareness, and there is a small group of people who are very committed to making sure that their communities are safe for everyone. And so at this point, Laura and I have been engaged quite a bit in a campaign to bring awareness about this issue. And it's one of the reasons, Mark and Manuel, that we really appreciate that you made this a keynote of your conference. We feel that all co-working conferences should be doing exactly this. We also feel that all co-working conferences should be modeling having a community agreement or a code of conduct at their event with an anti-harassment policy in it, so that the members or so that the attendees who attend the conference get used to that and can then take that back to their communities and put that in place. So I would say that there's a handful of spaces that I know of right now that are actively participating in creating sexual harassment policies in their spaces. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
That's I mean, we get this commitment 2 years ago when a manager comment this happened in their space, in her space. So we say, okay, we get the commitment to make this kind of panel. We should make it in 2020, but we cannot. We couldn't. So this is the time. And that's why we are the best conference, the best co-working conference in the world. We are just forward.
In every panel, he's putting that bar higher and higher. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's the story behind it. Back in 2019, we have a session at the end of the conference, which was, good vibes and explaining difficulties all managers have, like managing with real human beings in a shared workspace. And then one of the managers told the moderator, "Hey, I want to explain this story." And she came to us. We had that gender policy in place, and we have a board for that, and we discussed it with the moderator. And our conclusion it was that we don't want to present a subject like this, which is really to take seriously in a much relaxed, fun session. And we decided, and we took the compromise with that co-working manager, that it's not like we don't want to talk about this, it's that we want to talk about this in the correct way. We want to do it right. We want to have experts talking about this and giving guidelines, and do it in a relaxed way, but in a professional way, because we should talk about this. It's not something to hide, or it's not something to to be scared of or to be ashamed of. It's something that it must be talked about. I mean, it should be, as you said, we can have this conversation, right? But we want to do it on the right way. So this is why in the first digital conference we made, because last year it was a little bit of improvisation, we improvised to replace the physical conference. So this year we decided to do what it was the right thing to do. So thank you very much for being part of it. And I would like also the audience know that this is really in the middle of your night. So thank you very much for being part of the conference at midnight. Thank you so much for being part of us, and thank you very much for allowing our conference to be leading this change that we hope it can reach all the conferences all over the world. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Aris. Thank you, Laura. I think that your topic is going to be a very important topic in the next following years for a lot of co-working spaces. So these policies have to be adapted for a lot of people, and we bring the best people talking about this to the best conference, right? Thank you very much. We are in the last session. We are the closing panel of the conference. So we appreciate you are here. Thank you for connecting in your time zone. That is, I think, we know it's not easy. So thank you very much. You get a really good job, and we see you next time here physical. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We have questions right now. Okay. So if anybody in the audience have the questions, this is the time to do it. If no, say thank you and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the closing panel of the CWSC 2021. We are here in a much better time frame for Laura and from Iris. This time we are not asking them to get up in the middle of the night to make the panel. Thank you for that, and thank you for a great panel. I have to say a big warning. We are really hot Spaniards, and we are touchy, as I discussed it, and as Alberto asked, but we are very shy in conference asking questions. So it's very tough to make the people feel comfortable to ask questions. So if you are listening to me and you have listened to Laura and Iris, please feel free to ask questions. And this is why we are here. Hi, Iris. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the CWSC.
Hello, and thank you so much. We are just really thankful and honored to be here today. Really looking forward to this conversation, and I see that there's a couple questions here, and
Yes.
I'm looking forward to diving into them.
Yeah, let's go. What about you, Laura? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and happy to answer some questions. So
Okay. let's go ahead. Alberto Berzola from Working Company in Seville, well, in Sevilla, para los españoles. Here in Spain, because of our culture, we are very close to each other, and I would say that touch, it's even something important to us. In Andalusia, where I'm from, of course it is. How are the limits established so that this does not suppose a problem between cultures in the same co-working? I think that you replied to this more or less, but if you want to expand or if you want to give it another point of view, it would be so cool.
Yeah, I want to add something to that because what's really important is that harassment is usually a continual pushing of someone's boundaries after someone has already stated, like, this is not okay. So what's really important, again, about we can make mistakes and we can go and put our hand on someone out of kindness and out of connection, and then find out that they felt uncomfortable, they felt offended. So it's really important to remember that you listen and respond to people. If you get feedback from them and they say, I'm really uncomfortable when you did that, or they just repel, like I said earlier, then that is when you've learned something, and remember it for the next time. And so when someone sets a boundary and it's just, that is not okay, I don't like that to happen, or when you did this in our business meeting, it really made me feel uncomfortable. The way you told that joke really embarrassed me and I don't want that anymore. Then you listen. Like, it's really, I want people not to get caught up on like fear of doing the wrong thing. I want us to focus on responding by doing the right thing, by listening to people's boundaries and just learning and getting to know what's comfortable for people.
Well, that's great. Can I add something? There's a conference organizer that it was indeed her who gave me your contact. That every time we met in international conferences, I go there and give my hand, but she hugs me, and I never remember that she's a hugger. I mean, more close people. I'm always like, oh, I forgot that she's fine with hugging, which is, for me as a Spaniard, it's perfectly fine. I love hugging. But it's about that. It's remembering these details about the people. And for sure, right now I remember, because I think we talked about this in a previous call before the conference. It's important to remember how the people wants to be treated or how to be engaged. I don't know if that's the correct word in English. So yeah, it's something which does make a lot of sense.
Absolutely, Mark. And I think to answer Alberto's question from the standpoint of a co-working operator, right? So what Laura was referring to is interpersonal connections, interpersonal relations. And then to bring that into a co-working space and a co-working community in order to establish limits, it really comes down to understanding what your internal culture is, which is, of course, determined by Spanish culture, right? And it's also determined by who is in your space. So modeling, creating brave conversations, meaning modeling conversations as a co-working manager around what is okay and what is not okay, or what is acceptable from a cultural standpoint, and also making sure that there are opportunities for people to reach out to you as the co-working manager if there are any issues. But continuing to have these conversations on a regular basis about what feels good for people, and listening and encouraging people to talk about what is okay for them and what is not okay.
Thank you so much for the extra knowledge. Okay, let's go ahead with the next one. This is also from Alberto. Although I know although I know that it's a question with an answer that it can be very broad, if I wanted to establish a good security plan, how would you advise me to start? What lines do you think are the most important to define a plan that works? So if he wants to start to be more harassment aware, or to start in this path of making the space more safe? I don't know if that's a good summary. Which single advice, or what's the first thing he needs to do?
Download our toolkit. So one of the reasons we put that toolkit together, though, is because we think one of the most important pieces is having a framework, having a policy in place that you have sat down and thought about, that you've created, you've shared with your team. So once you have that understanding, this is how we create safe space. This is how we address a report of an incident where someone is feeling uncomfortable or feels harassed, right? So that framework is really important. And we created that toolkit to give you some kind of breakdown, and we talked about it in the presentation. Create this policy, which needs to have, who do we report? Who does the person report to? How does that report get documented? How do you interview people? How do you then investigate? And how do you conclude? So you can actually have very concrete steps in place. And that's the best thing, to have it before that first incident happens. So your community manager or anywhere, the person who gets that information goes, okay, I know what to do in this situation. A, B, C, it's at least clear. So that person right away knows, oh, they've thought about this. They're prepared to keep me feeling safe. And then you go from there through your process. And it can change and you can update that process, but having that framework from the get-go is really important.
Mm-hmm. Is there a direct link for that content? Could you share it in the chat if you want?
Yes.
That's great.
And Mark, while Laura's sharing that, I want to also say that I think another first step is, and perhaps before you download our toolkit, but definitely download that, also visit coworkingidea.org. And at coworkingidea.org, you will see that the April Coworking Idea Challenge is around creating a code of conduct for your co-working space. And in my belief, co-working spaces need to have a set of community agreements that everybody agrees to upon joining the co-working space. And when your set of community agreements specifically spells out your anti-harassment policy or your safe space policy, then you then move from that into creating that anti-harassment policy so that you have your comprehensive plan around how to handle the issues when they arise. But the first goal is to prevent harassment from even happening.
Thank you so much, Iris. I told you, Spaniards need a little bit of warm up, and right now they are asking questions. That makes us so happy. Ben Kolb, he's from Austria, but have a working space in Malaga. He asked, so if I understood correctly, also in Europe, if a member harasses another member, the space owner can be held legally liable for that. If so, what precautions can we take to avoid that legal liability for a member-to-member interactions?
Yeah, so you're going to need to check with your local laws, check with an employment lawyer or an HR department. But the overall guidance here is that people are going to look for documentation. What did you do? What happened? How quickly did you respond? How clear is that response? Were all parties informed? And do you have that documented, meaning you have them signing off on each step? So legally, what they're looking for is, did you do anything or did you just bury your head? Because the more proactive you are, then you've covered yourself by saying, look, this is an open space. They're not employed by us, but these are our policies. And these are the things that we did. All of those legal cases that we talked about, they got in trouble because they didn't have any documentation. They did not have a file that said, this is what we did. It was all word of mouth. Like, oh yeah, we did do something about it. We talked to that member. They said they weren't going to do it anymore. We were done. That's not going to cut it. as long as you have all of it documented and you're really clear about how you handled it in the most kind and responsive possible way, then you're going to have some protection there. And then legally, you can find out locally again what you can do to even be more safe from any kind of legal pursuit.
Okay. So I guess it's pretty clear. So there's the legal side, which has to be checked locally. But on the other hand, and this is also, again, some of the backstage conversation we had, there's what's right and it's what's legal. So for sure, I don't want to be sued, but then there's the what's right, and I want to sleep well. So everything should be taken into consideration. Local laws should be followed anywhere in the world, because now right now we are talking for most of our attendees are from Spain, but we should consider this will go all over the world. So check with your local laws, as Laura said, local lawyers, inform yourself, but on the other hand, you should also do the right thing. So it's a combination of both, and you cannot avoid doing the right thing in both fields. Okay, so we are good with that. The next one from Ana Berta Rodríguez Mereyes. One thing that defines me is not getting anywhere on time, but I'm always on time. I do not know if my question is appropriate, but how to create a policy of harassment with an empty neighboring premises that are without activity? I don't know if I understand this question. If you understand it, I'm not sure. Berta, if you are able to make, you are able to rewrite the question in a different way, we will try to reply. Let's go with
maybe Berta, if you want to ask the question in Spanish, maybe we understand it to translate it.
Okay, that's a great plan. Victor Vázquez Hernandez, Iris, Laura, thanks so much for your conference. It's as inspiring as practical. Mark and my neighbor Alberto mentioned a very interesting point, cultural differences. We are working spaces, hosting and international communities, and we do have an extra responsibility with these people. Somehow we are ambassadors. So to the point, we did have a case of harassment. Fortunately, nothing went too far, but it was a Spanish guy harassing a foreign coworker, and it was all about WhatsApp innuendos. Fortunately, we have a behavioral contract, and we actively promote an atmosphere of trust and confidence. But we were just aware of the situation when she told us about it. Obviously, we had a conversation with this guy, and he was forced to leave our space. He used the cultural different excuse, of course. But what concerned us is that we could do something about this because we're a small community, and we can build these dynamics of communication. You mentioned that anonymity is important. Any recommendations how?
I want to make sure I understand the question is, and thank you, Victor. Are you specifically asking how to make an anonymous report? Is that the question?
Yes, he had a case, and the girl reported, and he was like, I think that what he points is like, we were happy because we can solve that because she reported, but how to set up an anonymous way of reporting so they can maybe make more people to talk faster. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. I think it's in that way.
Yeah, so I think the simplest way to do that would be to create a Google form or a type form, some type of a link that allows people to fill out an anonymous feedback form. And you'll receive feedback on all kinds of things, not just sexual harassment. You know, you'll receive feedback on how much people like the coffee or the tea in the kitchen. But making that feedback form part of your culture, putting it into your, you said you have a behavioral contract. So maybe add that onto the behavioral contract. Let them know, hey, here is how we like to hear from our members. If you see anything that concerns you in the space, or if you have suggestions about how we can make our community
better in any way, please let us know. And then it's really encouraging people to have a positive communication with the co-working space. And by making that an anonymous form, by not collecting the email address or the name, you allow people to report anything through that form that they might be concerned about.
And I just want to say to Victor, I'm glad to hear in that they had a positive experience with it, because it is hard. It can be challenging and awkward. And I think that, just going through the process, you learn. And yeah, it's really important. So I just wanted to say, a great job that you were able to do that for your member and create a safe space.
Thank you for the answer. I have to say though that I would like to make an extra question about this. When there's an anonymous way to denounce a situation, it's really tough to investigate, right? Because I mean, we had that for the Coworking Spain conference. We never got a denounce, but I was like, what? I mean, it's you can send that anonymously, and I was like, how we investigate if we've got a report? I mean, because then you only have the person who committed the situation in some way, so it's tough to investigate, and you're wondering, or I'm wondering, what's the best way to handle that situation?
Yeah, I think it's a good clarifying question, because I've thought it myself. It's like, what am I going to do with this information? So what's important is that in the feedback form, if you ask that specific question about if you're reporting harassment, please note that we can do more investigation if you're comfortable providing us with information. If you are not comfortable, we will proceed as well as we can, kind of thing, right? So you're letting them know we are going to do our best. If you want more from us, we'll need you to trust us with more information. Now, what you can do with an anonymous report, though, is somebody says, there's somebody in our group meeting every week or during the lunch and learn that is making inappropriate jokes, and it makes me really uncomfortable. They're probably not the only one that you've heard that from. And you may have even witnessed it or heard it from a team member that's like, I don't even know how to deal with this, right? So that anonymous report just becomes more information that helps you go to someone and say, we have had some feedback that some of the comments that you're making and the jokes that you're making are making other people in the community uncomfortable. And that person might say, well, who is it? Well, who's doing that? Everyone loves my jokes. That's not important. What is important is that there are some people that don't feel comfortable. So we're gonna, as a culture, talk about how do we shift that? Like, I need you to just understand this isn't the place. Maybe there's another place for that, right? So there's a lot you can do with just that anonymous feedback, but if it's really a serious allegation, then just letting that person know and having an optional box that's like, please provide your name or more information, or can we follow up with you and provide your information in this particular box? It's not required, right? So they can opt in or opt out for that.
Thank you so much for the reply. I don't know if there are any questions. I know that Berta did not rephrase the question, so I guess we ran out of questions. I can have several more questions, but I think that Manuel, are we on time? Are we late?
I think it's time to. Is it timing up? I think it's. I mean, we are almost on time, right? If you have a small question, you can go. But if not, we will. I
will ask one. Okay. I'm concerned about the yellow zone. I mean, I think that when we are in the green zone, like perfect situation, nobody feels bad about anything. And the red zone is a criminal offense, and then you have to call the police. I think that in both situations, it's pretty clear what to do. But I would love, and I think that also these cultural differences mostly are in the yellow zone, because maybe In some cultures, the green zone it's a little bit of the yellow zone of other cultures. I don't know if you can have an extra thought about this yellow zone. I'm talking about that chart with the green on the left, the red on the right, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Iris, did you want to jump in there first?
I do have thoughts, but Laura, I'd love to hear sort of your thoughts and then maybe expand on them.
Well, I was just going to say, this is what's really important for signage. Like, this is where you can get creative and actually create your own, you know, green, yellow, and red signage in your space or in your agreement, where your members learn. Like, there's a lot of, maybe we are an international community, and there's a lot of different cultural translations of what's okay and not okay. So here's our chart. This is all the behavior that's in the green. This is all feels good. This is over here in the red. This is not tolerated, 0 tolerance over here. This is the yellow, where we know that people will misinterpret. You know, this is where the jokes and the different types of innuendos and banter and flirting, or however you want to put it, so that your community understands. And you literally have a sign that's in the space or in your digital communications, where when they're getting onboarded, they learn what's in the yellow, that we recognize that this can be interpreted differently by different people, but it's just as important that we stay all in the green as much as possible. And that this is the yellow that we're trying to help you define and be as clear as possible. And then you have that to come back to. When you come back to an allegation, you can say, it's in our yellow, right? So that means slow it down. If it's not making people comfortable, then it needs to go. Like, that is, we're going to move it into the red, and we're not going to do it. Does that make sense? So, and then Iris, you can add on your thoughts.
Yeah, I think that this is a really important question, Mark, and I'm really glad that you asked it, because what we don't want is a culture where people don't feel free to express ourselves, right? And we don't want a culture of false accusations, or a culture where somebody's life or their career is ruined because they have been accused of something that wasn't actually what, you know, that once the investigation has happened, it turns out that that wasn't actually what took place. So to me, this is where having a member agreement or a code of conduct is really important, because it shows that the co-working community or the co-working managers are serious about creating safe space for everyone to be, and also understand that members are going to interact with each other, right? Members are going to have interactions that are culturally appropriate all day, every day, and that we want to encourage that. And I think that this is also why we want to be having these conversations, just like you're modeling right now, Mark, having these conversations more often, so that as we have international communities coming together and different expectations of what's okay and what's not okay, we can be providing everyone with an understanding of what is in that yellow zone, and also that we are looking to keep everybody safe. And by keeping everybody safe, that means keeping people, it's not just about keeping people who might be victims of harassment safe. It's also about keeping people who might be victims of being accused of harassment that doesn't happen safe. And we don't want people to be afraid to take a step. And I hear this a lot today. Well, I hear this a lot from my male friends. I don't know what's okay anymore. And I understand that. And I want everybody to be talking about that, what's okay and what's not okay, right? Because the more we talk about that, then we get clearer on what's in that yellow zone and how that affects each individual person. I hope I'm answering that in an effective way.
Thank you so much. I love that reply. And this is the moment to say goodbye to the Coworking Spain Conference 2021. But I would like to thank you, Iris and Laura, for being part of this. This is a really important topic for us, and we would love to see to be the first one of a lot more to come from other conferences. So if you are organizing a co-working conference or a conference of any kind, please copy us. We would love to. And again, thank you so much for making co-working a little bit more safe and make people more aware of what's right, what's not right, and how to create a better communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thanks, Iris and Laura. As Mark said, this is an important topic, and we hope that any co-working conference copy us. Not only co-working conference, I mean, any conference copy us in this topic. And I think it's going to be a important topic in the future in the conference. So we hope we are going to keep with this on the line. And I want to say thank you also to Iris and Laura, but I want to say thank you to all the attendees. We already have this, the last 4 weeks was a really great conference, and different conference, but great conference. So we would like to say thank you to all of them. And we also want to say, see you next year. And we hope it's going to be physical we don't know yet where, but we would love that we came together again in the same space. And because I think the great thing of the co-working is the community, and the community must be together and talking to each other and telling a lot of things that is not that possible in the online world, right? So thank you very much. Thank you to be there. This is the end of the Co-working Spain Conference 2021. And the Reset Rethink Conference, we have to reset, we have to rethink all the conference, and hope we see you soon in 2022. Maybe we are going to make, of course, we're going to make more podcasts, more videos like this, or like the road to CWSC. And thank you very much. See you on the next edition of the Co-working Spain Conference. Bye-bye.